Perfect. I see people are trickling in. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. While everyone's coming in, some quick housekeeping rules. One, if you want to hear anything again from what we are going to discuss today, we are going to send a recording. We also have a Q&A section, so if you would want to ask any questions, please drop it in the chat, or in general, if you want to comment on things, please make sure that you change your Zoom chat settings to everyone. Great. So let's dive right in. So today's topic is RTO 2.0, or how I like to call it, return to in-person, I would say, and focus on that. And really, we have incredible guests here today. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. I am Lisa. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Gable. We'll talk about Gable in a second, but we'll start with Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael Marola. I'm the VP of Places at Intuit. I've been at Intuit for about 100 days now, and I previously was at Shopify.
Amazing. Megan?
Hey everyone, I'm Megan Burns-Lansendorf, and I'm with the Not Worldwide. I'm the director of our global workplace team, and I've been with them for about 5 years.
Amazing. Yeah.
Me and Spencer, I'm head of all real estate and facilities for Lucid. I've been here for almost 4 years now.
Amazing. Okay, great. So while everyone's joining, would love to kick this off with a little icebreaker. And audience, what's your favorite breakfast food? And I'll ask this also to our panelists. I can start. My favorite is definitely Eggs Benedict. That is like my go-to, and everything that there is like a big event, something that I want to like spoil myself, I go and have my Eggs Benedict. Megan, how about you?
You stole my answer. I was going to say, I love a good Eggs Benedict. So every time I go out for a brunch, that's always what I'm ordering.
Love it. Yeah. Get you on mute.
So someone mentioned chicken and waffles, which that made me start drooling just now. That's my go-to when I'm out at our Raleigh office. I'm typically pretty simple though. I enjoy just granola and yogurt in the morning.
Healthy version. Michael, how about you?
I think that I'm pretty simple. Most of the foods I eat are like the same things that they sell on like the grammar school aisle. So I'm gonna go with strawberry Pop-Tarts, no frosting.
That's amazing. That's a good one. Great. Okay, super cool. Perfect. So a little bit about Gable. So we pride ourselves in being the operating system for the modern workplace. The way that we do it is by providing access to thousands of co-working spaces globally for employees to book space on demand, and also help companies manage their existing portfolio with desk reservation, bookings, and have all the data combined in one platform. And one of the things that we have learned quite a lot from customers and overall trends, and I'm sure everyone who's on the call and our panelists have seen this quite a lot, is that workplace strategy has shifted tremendously in the past few years. From 9 to 5, everyone's in office. There is not even a discussion, right? To something that is really like a bell curve and a spectrum for companies being either fully remote or hybrid or managed hybrid or flex. I've heard the gamut of how companies are, I would say, defining their workplace strategy, which is quite unique and interesting. It brings a lot of opportunities, but I'm sure all of us have seen this. It brings also a lot of challenges as well. So we're here to talk about both. And I would say my first poll question would be for the audience: what's your current workplace policy? We'll give it 2 seconds. Okay, let's close this and let's see the answers. Interesting to see if it's a bell curve or not. Okay, somewhat. So we have companies that are fully remote, key moments only, which is interesting. Days vary or prescribed days of hybrid. Fully in office, we do have some, and a mixture. Great. And we're still deciding, which is very interesting as well. And we hear this a lot. So I'd like to kick it off to our panelists, actually. Megan, can you share a little bit about your workplace strategy? How it evolved? I would say, you've been with the company for all of the spectrum. So I'm sure there are a lot of things to unpack here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, prior to the pandemic, we were in office every single day, followed that normal structure. And we're a tech company, so we did offer a lot of flexibility already. But as, COVID hit and everything continued to progress, we realized that we needed to keep up with the future of work. And so how we're currently operating is on a remote model, and we want our employees to work where they work best. And this could be something different for everyone. We are operating in 16 different countries. So we know that there are going to be nuances with local cultures and countries that we want to be able to support and offer to our employees. So we do come together for what we call moments that matter, but those are still, optional opportunities. They're not required, but highly encouraged. So that's a little bit about how the Not Worldwide operates currently.
So many questions, but I'll keep them as a follow-up. Ian, how about you?
So similar, before the pandemic, obviously all 5 days, all day. We've slowly adopted different policies as we've come back into the office. We actually didn't really push any kind of mandate at all until just July of this year. We were very, very flexible. Everyone just had the choice of just being remote or at home, come into the office whenever they want. But we did see a slight delay in some of our ramping of our younger salespeople. And we from our observations, at least, we noticed that, or we thought that it was probably due to the fact that they weren't around their teams and their colleagues to be able to pick up on some of those techniques and learn the training a little bit more quickly. So we started mandating, soft mandate, our revenue organization come back into the office twice a week from that point on. And we have seen a good increase in productivity and just general energy among our sales team. So that's our only soft mandate right now. Everyone else is completely up to their own preference. So.
And that's also interesting, like the fact that it's basically there is some combination of managed hybrid for specific teams, and the rest is similar to what Megan mentioned. Do what work where you work best. And Michael, can you share a little bit about your first 100 days of what you've observed and have in terms of workplace strategy, and also from your past experience at Shopify, leading I think very different culture, right?
Yeah, very different approaches. So at Intuit, we do have a hybrid approach. We do expect folks to come in at least 2 days a week to the office, and that is determined by the team. And so it's really intended to be that the teams are in the office at the same time, so that it's not an arbitrary sort of you have to come in just because, but it's actually to make sure that the team you're working on, whether that's your project team or your hierarchical team or whatever it might be, whatever is the most meaningful to you, are able to work together. And then previously I was at Shopify, and Shopify was a fully remote company. And so there the approach was that folks were fully remote. We hired folks in different places, not based off of anywhere we had locations, but we did have occasional moments where we would bring people in for sort of offsite type experiences a handful of times a year with their team, where we'd bring them all to one place together.
So again, very different approaches in that sense. But I do think that even into the fact that there is a mandate, it is mostly on focus on collaboration in a sense, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a
Which is very
mandate
interesting.
really yet. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no, I don't know that there's anything that happens if you don't do it, but
Yeah.
it is
A strong ask.
Yeah,
A strong
it is the
ask.
expectation. I think the thing that's interesting when you compare to having been the person to manage the program at both places and to see sort of the different things is the interesting thing is that Shopify hired folks all around the world. And so a team is not geo-located, right? And so if there was my point is I think it matters on which company and what the right thing is for the company. At Intuit, we actually do have teams that are geo-located. And so when you come in and it's on the day that the team all sort of aligns on, you're seeing your team. If Shopify was to do something like that, it would be like, well, so-and-so went into New York today and so-and-so went into Toronto today. So what is really the value of them coming in? And that's why I think sort of each company has to figure out what's right for their workforce.
And Megan, I see you nodding. And I think part of it is the strategy. How can you talk to me a little bit about the Knott's hiring strategy in that sense? How does it tie to workplace and the decision of your workplace strategy?
Yeah, so it's actually a really good question. And we are, looking to hire the best people in the best locations, the right person, right time. And so what we're doing is, I know this is part of the discussion that we're going to get to later on, is like, what are we looking to improve and some of the challenges that we're facing in 2024. And we're looking to really fine tune our hiring strategy, aligning it to where are our people co-located? Does it make sense to have real estate in these areas or does it not? Because if I have 70, build engineers in Austin, Texas, they're not going to go in together. They like being home alone and quiet spaces. But if I have a sales team in the UK, does it make sense for them to be, together, and does it make sense for us to have real estate? So we're really starting to dive into that. But we also have to look up at the makeup of cities, right? And so we know in places like New York and London, where flats are a little bit smaller, you're tending to live with multiple people. And it does make sense for us to be able to have locations there, because we know that our employees might need space to get out, and they do work better coming into an office because they don't have 5 roommates who are also on calls all day long. So really looking at your demographics and truly what makes sense for your business and how you operate in each city.
So a lot of parameters actually. So it is much more, challenging, I would say, to keep like and maybe it's a follow-up. How do you prioritize between those parameters, right?
Yeah. And so that's definitely something I'm working on right now is, do we define, where our real estate is and hire to that? Or, do we look at the makeup as a whole of like where we want to hire and then say, okay, when we do get together, here are the real estate locations we're going to come together towards, and then align our travel budgets and everything so that people can gather in these very specific locations and make it intentional. So it's what are the priorities for the company, what matters based on how you're hiring, and where you're trying to, look at those backfill locations and why you're hiring in those locations, because in every location, there's nuances, right? What is the regulatory risk? How easy is it to enter into that market? And what does real estate look in that market? So it's going to look different for the Knot worldwide, than it does for any other company.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And Ian, you mentioned that there is some change. You've already started implementing changes. Maybe a follow-up to that is it mostly workplace strategy? Is it mostly top down or bottoms up? Like, how do you decide?
That's I think there's a mix of from all angles, really. We really value our employees first and how they, what's going to work for them. So any consideration of even that soft mandate we pined over that for months and months before we actually pulled the trigger. But we do take into consideration what our employees are saying through our engagement surveys, things like that. And me personally, every day I'm walking around on the floor, just talking and engaging with everyone and trying to get as much feedback as I can get. Sometimes they're more willing to just say it to me than they are putting in a survey or telling their superiors. So I gather all that and I run it up the chain. And I really, advocate for our employees from that perspective. Ultimately, obviously, the decisions get made from the top, but there's a lot of feedback and employee involvement and voice in that in those decisions as well.
And Michael, a question to you. So obviously Intuit does have a lot of real estate, and you also mentioned in terms of, teams are co-located, right? So what comes first? Is it which markets do we want to enter and then we hire around, or reversed, we just want to hire the best talent and then we'll circulate and real estate will follow?
Yeah, we're looking for the best talent in the world. So we will determine what those, talent markets are. Those markets don't change dramatically over time. So we're able to make those long-term real estate decisions. As an example, 2 weeks ago I was in Atlanta. We opened up a 360,000 square foot brand new ground up office there. And so we are certainly invested in markets where we think that there is great talent, and we have more on the way. And so we really look at those talent pools. And like I mentioned earlier, we also make sure that we have geolocate the teams. And so it's not just an office to hire whoever Intuit needs to hire. It is specifically certain groups or product teams or sub verticals of the company that we keep in different areas, so that when they do come in those 2 days a week, it can be really solid outputs, collaborative outputs, really seeing your teammates, seeing your leader, seeing your cross-functional partners that you're delivering a project on.
And I would say, what are your KPIs that you're looking to measure in terms of effectiveness of those office openings or hirings or collaboration? Like you mentioned a lot of things here.
There's a lot of KPIs to look at, but I think nothing really trumps anything over employee engagement as just like that big high level KPI. And I will admit and be vulnerable here and say I'm quite anxious about it, because I've never worked at a company where the engagement has been so high consistently. So I'm worried that there's nowhere to go but down in some way, because it really is impressive to see what the engagement is. I think a lot of that I would attribute to the geolocation of teams. And I think that when you don't have that and you have folks coming in, it feels like you need to come in just cause, as opposed to like you're using this moment to create connection, to build trust. And I will admit that, and to be clear, Shopify is a lovely, wonderful company, and I think they've done the right thing for them. However, I have in 3 months at Intuit, because of this hybrid way of working, been able to build more trust, connection, sense of belonging, etc., with my team than I was able to in 2.5 years, where I was only seeing folks, once or twice a year. So I think, again, it's the right thing for the right company. Obviously, Shopify benefits from being able to hire anywhere in the world, as opposed to through these catchment areas. So there's a bit of pros and cons in there, but KPI wise, I think engagement is the one to look at.
Very helpful, which is much different than, office utilization, right? Like this is not something that you are, I would say probably not your North Star.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something we track and we certainly look at, but the why behind office utilization is making sure they're coming in for the right reasons, and it's not just cause, but it's because of engagement. There's plenty of other things we look at, like in this market, we thought we'd be able to hire this many of this type of talent. Is that actually being realized? Are we able to hire them as fast as we thought we were in that market? Did we bet on the correct market the right way? Lots of KPIs in the background, but I think the one that we care most about is around engagement. And one of the reasons why I joined Intuit is because it has a really good, solid history of sort of year over year winning those, best employer awards and type things. We just got a new one today. And so I think that is something that is ingrained in Intuit and who they are, that has persisted through COVID.
And Megan, it's quite different, right? In a sense, what Intuit is doing versus the not worldwide in terms of, again, teams are not co-located. How would you respond to that? Like, what are your KPIs? It's quite different, like in terms of, I would assume, how would you look at engagement, collaboration, sense of connection. You also mentioned that you do bring teams together, but it's not mandatory. So walk me through that. What would be your response to Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. So we used 2023 as kind of a base year for developing some of our data on after we, came out with our future of work stance of saying, work where you work best. We started putting controls into place for really gathering our data and understanding when, how, and why employees were gathering. So we have a full year of data behind us, and we're using that as our baseline as we continue to look to 2024, 2025. How can we be more proactive? For us, the new offsite is, the new onsites is the new offsite. So how do we use our real estate for those offsite locations? And if they're going to be not used for everyday work, but intentional moments for collaboration, we want to see if we can find trends. Are there meetings that are happening annually, quarterly? Where are you gathering? How many people are coming in? How does this inform our finance strategy? And then from there, are we building out our office spaces the correct way? Are they, how they were built is how they are intended to be used in the reality, right? And then we're also consistently gathering leadership feedback, our employee surveys, and me and my community team and my workplace team are constantly looking at our industry partners and really trying to push the envelope with what we're doing and how do we get better every single time. And if there is a new opportunity for bringing people together and creating those experiences, I think the thing that I really like about the Knot is they're willing to take that risk and say, let's see if it works. And if it doesn't, what are our lessons learned? And, if it does, let's continue to roll with it and see how successful it continues to be. So it's been fun being here on the experience, but I also know, it does look different for every company.
And question, so you mentioned a few things. The one, I really love the iterative approach, right? We see a lot of companies, even large enterprises, because they're trying to figure out what works best in this new type of solution or world, I would say, right? When employees just not a lot of them are not co-located, or you're hiring differently. Maybe a question, you mentioned that, you have a year full of data, right? What surprised you in terms of the data? What interesting insight have you seen that you would like to share?
Yeah, so we were, we had real estate in New York, right in the financial district, and employees were not coming in. And we were just like, what is happening? Is it because, of the mass exodus in New York, or is it truly where our office is located? And so after we did some research, talked to our employees, did some real estate research, got our boots on the ground, we said, let's roll the dice and let's see if we can get a WeWork, see how people are going to come into a WeWork, which was a pretty bold move for us after having a 10-year lease, in the financial district. And it was a little bit of a risk, but we took it and we saw attendance skyrocket. And to the point where we didn't have enough desks, we were booking across multiple floors in the WeWork, and it gave us enough data and confidence that we were able to secure a lease in that location. And truly having a real estate in the right location for our New York team really, really made a difference. And it really helped inform our decisions and get that confidence level from a financial standpoint.
That's amazing. I think this is such a different way, right, than doing it before, in terms of, we know that we need to find an office, but we don't know where. We'll just assume X, but having the data and the utilization is a really smart way that you can back this up, right? So it's phenomenal. How about you? What data do you currently use, or is interested in learning to inform more real estate or strategy decisions, I would say?
Yeah, so just like Michael said, engagements are number one. We want our employees to feel like they love their experience here at Lucid and are productive and have the tools that they need. As far as new markets or finding locations for real estate, very similar to what Megan just said, we whenever we open a new office, we always land in a WeWork or some type of co-working space first, gather, the attendance numbers, how active are our employees coming into the office, gather feedback from them as well on, like just in Raleigh right now, we're actually looking at our first direct lease. We're in a WeWork there, and we've had great attendance there, but I've also spent time out there with those employees asking them, okay, where in the city is going to work for you? Our leadership is really in tune with all the employees out there, and they've basically told me, like, look right here, here, and here. And so I was able to find a good spot within where they're located. And really it works best for us anyways, because most of our employees, the talent that we're pulling from, they'll aggregate kind of to specific areas anyways. So that's what works for us. Let's see. As far as overall KPIs for me, I'm looking at show up rates, not just utilization, because utilization is so hard to measure, and it's going to be harder to measure going forward based upon desk counts and things like that, right? But just show up rate. How many employees do we have within a certain radius of that office, and how often are they showing up on a daily basis or during the week? That helps me measure like how much space we're going to need in the future, right? So if we have 40 employees in Raleigh right now, but we've got 50% show up rate, that shows me that I need to measure for about 50% or provide for about 50% of headcount relative to how many employees are assigned to that location. So it helps me size that real estate a little bit better. Yeah, but I would also love to hear from Michael and Megan how they're looking at space overall, right? Because with the utilization, how I used to measure it, and typically historically, desk counts and head counts, right? And how often how many of those spaces were being used daily. But now I feel like we're moving away from that more to like various types of spaces that are hard to really measure by head count, right? You need maybe not quite as much space as before, but you still need a decent amount of space and provide for different types of experiences within that space, right? Rather than just desks. So
yeah, so that's a great question. Maybe Michael, Megan, feel free to chime in. But basically, how have you redesigned, or have there been some redesign process on existing offices configurations? What comes into play? Michael mentioned just open, a new office. I'm sure a lot of it came there. That it's not just, desks, not just cubicles. So curious to hear from both of you, because it seems like it is something to definitely take into account. Michael, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to share that. Yes, we've completely rethought how we design our spaces for sure, both our new deliveries as well as revamping our existing spaces. I had the great fortune of working with wonderful people like Akiba Burrell when I was at Airbnb prior to Shopify. And Airbnb actually, before COVID, approached the idea of sort of what might be called desk sharing, or neighborhoods where you actually put more people into the neighborhood than there are physical desks, because you have alternative work points, right? Whether those are meeting rooms or team desks or soft seating, et cetera. And so we certainly have leveraged that type of thinking when we have redesigned our spaces. And I think that it feels like where the industry generally has been going since COVID days, as opposed to saying, it'd be awfully wasteful to say you only have to come in twice a week, but we all get a desk. I mean, it'd be 5 days a week of just waste, which just seems wholly irresponsible on so many levels. So we're definitely sharing that. Also, like, you don't want it to feel like a ghost town, right? You want it to feel packed and buzzing. And so we certainly use design to help nudge that behavior. Admittedly, Friday at 4 p.m., it feels still quite empty in a lot of places, but you'll definitely find that it is, jam-packed certain days of the week.
Again, how about you?
Yeah, so we recently just opened up our Barcelona office at the end of last year, and prior to that opening, we had over 400 individual workstations for our team, because it is one of our largest teams. And we again based on data and how people were coming in, decided that not only were we going to reduce our footprint, even though our team sizes stayed the same, we were going to, I think we have 187 actual workstations in our new office. So dramatically cut the number of workstations we have. And instead, we're super, super intentional about the other ways of working within the space. So, more phone booths, more two-person collaboration areas. We have tech-enhanced rooms so that even when you are virtual, the technology that we have in those rooms makes you feel more connected and you can get content easier. So we have more spaces for larger teams to get together. And as a direct result of how we are designing those spaces, we are seeing employees really start to flock to those locations because the spaces work for their team gatherings. So there was a lot that we did change in Barcelona, and so far it's been very, very successful. But we also know that we can't rinse and repeat, because what works in Barcelona isn't going to necessarily work for India or, in our Irish office. So we want to make sure that we are looking at that, local nuances, but keeping our global brand standards and our overall approach the same.
Amazing. What a crazy ride to basically cut more than 50% of your actual desks and have such tremendous success. There are a lot of questions in our Q&A sections that I'm going to would love our panelists to answer. And let's dive right in. One question from John. What strategies do you employ to reduce perceived or real wasted time for commute? Distributed offices in urban area reduce commute time saving opportunities at the office to offset commute time. What are the key aspects that you're looking at there? If anyone wants to jump in.
I'm happy to start. First of all, I would say that, I don't think it's perceived. I think commute is wasted time. I don't know that anyone would say it's just a perception. It's valuable. It just seems awful from so many perspectives, from sustainability just to your life and all sorts of reasons. Although I guess some people have found peace and comfort in podcasts in the process. So I mean, that's a real thing. Like there's no way to sort of dance around that. Commute sucks, and part of having to come into an office that is a gnarly, hard problem that I don't think anyone's going to solve. But I'll say a few things. One is I want to address in the question. It says distributed office in an urban area to reduce commute time ? This is a place that I feel pretty strongly that that's not the right solution. And the reason why I would say that is because I think every company needs to answer why you are coming into the office, if you're coming into the office. And that answer, I assume, should not be because we said so, or because we would like you in a supervised environment. It really should be around, better productivity, better connection with your team, creating trust, creating belonging, et cetera, right? That requires people to be in the same place. And so distributed offices, I think, really wither away at that, because it goes to that sort of just come into the nearest thing, because as opposed to go to where the people, where the team, where the conversation is, right? And so I would actually make the argument that for a company like Intuit or any other company that is hybrid for similar reasons, is you actually want fewer, bigger offices. You want to, as an example, going back to the design of spaces, rather than having many little cafes to get coffee, let's have one cafe in a giant building to get coffee, one giant cafe, so that you're intermingling and seeing those people, since you're only there certain days of the week. And so I would actually argue for longer commutes in this instance, purely so you can get most people in one place. Now, do you have to be in the office 9 to 5, and can you help deal with commute times? That's a great question. As far as Intuit goes, the strategies we are employing to deal with that, as we do offer in many of our bigger employee markets, transportation, option shuttle systems, and certainly offer subsidies for employees to, I'm in the Bay Area, and so I have my, BART ticket, Clipper card that I get I think it's $150 a month on, or whatever it might be. There's also shuttle systems that I can take advantage of to get to work, so that I can either work on that shuttle, or maybe more likely fall asleep 5 minutes into the shuttle ride. But I think a lot of it depends on the market you're in and how brutal or not that commute is.
Anyone else wants to add anything on that?
Sure. We also do the same with with basically monthly passes for transit. We intentionally try to locate our offices near hubs like that. So our headquarters here in South Jordan is right on our front runner stop. It's right outside of our building. So our employees can take that train all the way up and down the Wasatch Front. And we give those passes to all of our employees that will use it. What was I gonna say? I'm so sorry. I think that just like what Michael was saying, really the idea is to transition the office to a tool to get your work done at a higher level. Right? There's going to be days we're never going to compete with the home office for desk work ever again. If someone has the option to work from home at a desk or commute in, they're not going to choose to commute in just to do the same work they could have done at home. So we really need to think about the office use as a tool to do other things that they couldn't do at home, and they could do at a higher level, whether that be with their employees and having that connection, or technology, right? Having the spaces that are set up and curated for specific uses that they might not be able to have at home. Like rooms like this that are set up with audio capabilities that they can do recordings for customers, things like that would maybe be a little bit more costly to get set up at home for their own personal use, right?
Agreed. One final question, I would say, well, before more questions, but one final question from Q&A is, which I think is really fascinating, and we touched a little bit about this, is how has leadership in your companies led the charge for office attendance? Who wants to?
I mean, I think this is whoever wrote this question, this is the right question to ask. And maybe I'll not directly answer it, but sort of like just validate the importance of this. Is I think that if whatever your approach is, if you alone are the person driving it, something's already wrong there, right? Like I think how a company works, whether it is how you use Slack or how you use Outlook or why you have offsites or why you have meetings, how often you meet, who's in the room. Do you guys prefer big meetings so people have lots of transparency? You're just the people that actually need to be there. Whatever your culture is around how you get work done, hybrid or not hybrid or remote or whatever it is, has to just be part of that. It shouldn't be a standalone thing that is like, hey, some team over here from HR has decided this is our new approach. It needs to be, this is the culture of how we work at this company. And the only way to do that is through leaders driving that, and not through some, G&A team saying we've declared a new approach to when you need to come in and why you come in. It should be how you work. Think about how you deal with international teams, how you deal with time zones, when you have meetings and you have to figure out what do we do for the Irish team and the team in Tokyo and the team in the US. Someone's going to lose out in this meeting. What's your approach to that? Do you take turns? Do you always favor one? All these sort of like cultural, how you get work done. This whole return to office, hybrid, remote is just one more of those things. And leaders have to be able to be the ones to drive this. And I think you probably know from my answer already how we do it at Intuit, which is obviously lean heavily on the leaders. But I would say I have not yet met a company who has been successful in this space that does not do it through the leaders, as opposed to through, some team like the ones many of us on this call lead, trying to drive it independent.
Megan, would love to get your thoughts here. And how do you even, how do you bring leadership to this together? What's even the relationship between those decisions between your team and leadership and even HR? Love to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to make sure that we have a lot of different perspectives as we are making decisions. As one of the main stakeholders in proposing the approach to return to office or future of work, or how we are working now, however, you want to coin it these days. It's been, with our community team, with the partnership from legal, as we are, I guess, like funneling it up and saying, okay, is this going to stick? Do you think your teams are going to respond to this? And making sure we get that leadership feedback. It would be such a huge miss to not get that, and you would not be successful. So doing those checkpoints, getting their perspective on what does and does not work is absolutely critical. And not only getting their feedback, but making sure they're bought in on the process and then following through. And if they're not following through, why or why not? If you're bought in and you've given us the feedback, but you're not showing up, where's the breakdown? So, as Michael said, leadership has to drive the change. They have to be bought in and really help reinforce and disseminate all of that information down.
And I would say maybe that would be my last question, but to that point of just, making decision, doing some iterations and following through, would like for our panelists to share something that didn't work, right? Like what were things that you thought are working well, or you assumed would be helpful, but were challenging and you have to change an approach. Does anyone have any anecdote for something like that happened?
I think one thing is, I certainly learned this the hard way multiple times, which is that I don't know that there's something that we can correctly say employees prefer, right? Is like, we have 17,000 employees. I think they have 17,000 different preferences as far as our approach to this, not two preferences. It's not like this camp and that camp, like everyone's individual. And so, I've made the mistake of going into meetings thinking like, hey, I'm a dad. I understand that like the values of working at home and how that every parent will prefer that because you get to have time with the kids and maybe like deal with childcare issues, only to see like many hundreds of people react and say like, what are you talking about? We have to go to an office because we can't be productive at home because we have these kids here. It's like, oh, well, that's a good point. And so like, I think one of the lessons I just keep learning over and over again is like, everyone has an individual preference here. And so I think that it's a disservice to the entire employee body to chase a preference or to chase a majority's, like vote on what they think we should be doing, as opposed to a company saying, this is who we are. This is how we work. We would love you to join us and be part of this ride and to be part of our mission. And this is how we do this mission. You can count on us for doing it this way. I mean, you can predict that we'll do it this way. You can buy that house wherever, knowing that this is our approach, as opposed to like, hey, we got something back, we're changing it this time. Now it's going to be, this instead. And like, we're actually changing in this market because at the employee meeting, we heard this. And there's this lack of predictability about what's happening. And you can't really, make long-term decisions, or you sort of like have this constant anxiety about what the next company email is going to actually say. And so my lesson learned here is that you have to solve for the right thing for the company. You should probably stick to your guns on that for certainly the medium term, hopefully the long term, but constantly changing to satiate sort of different things has its own negatives in affecting people's sense of stability and in some people's ability to actually do that. We have to remember people sign up their kids to schools and all sorts of things based off of these decisions that we're making.
Couldn't agree more. I think that it comes back to strong leadership and, at the end of the day, presenting and practice what you preach in that sense as well, I think, which is quite interesting. And we even had in the survey, right, at the beginning of this webinar, that there are some companies that are still figuring this out, and it does cause anxiety, like those iterations in some shape or form are not sustainable for the long term, right? Megan, anything else to add or lessons learned, I would say?
No, I think Michael kind of hit the nail on the head. Is just like when you're rolling out an approach, you have to kind of be all in on it and make sure that the leadership is confident in what they're presenting. And, I think there is something to be said about, okay, we didn't really get it right this time. And being able to admit that as as leadership, but also saying, okay, here's how we're going to pivot. And it's not just saying, okay, this is the problem when we didn't get it right. It's like, okay, here's our solution to that. So, +1 to everything that Michael said.
Incredible. one last question from the audience, and then we will wrap up. But I do think it's quite interesting to hear your thoughts. Is what types of events are more effective to drive employee engagement? And Michael, we talked that employee engagement is #1 KPI, right? So what are the things that you think work best? Whether those are small team events, on-site is the new off-site, right? And anything else. Would love for our panelists to respond, whoever wants to take it.
Yeah, I can jump in here. So we have an event form that we have all of our employees fill out every time they're planning an event to happen on site, just to make sure that we can have the proper support to make sure the event is successful. And what we're finding is that we have 4 signature events every single year. We have our annual kickoff, an annual day that we call Donate. And that's where we get out and do charity work, which is just like an amazing day for our company. Our holiday parties are obviously in high attendance, and then our Pride parades and festivals that we do celebrating. And so we are finding that outside of those 4 signature events, which have a high attendance, our groups where we're coming together as leadership teams, or, our marketing leadership all gets together, our senior leadership is all getting together, or our entire sales team is all getting together. It's when you're including that whole group coming together, we're seeing the highest attendance. In connection to that, we are also seeing the teams that are doing, hey, every month we want to get together in office, and this is the office that we're gathering. This is the time, it's set, it's on the calendar. We're seeing varying attendance. So those more sporadic, annual, quarterly, twice a year events are highly more attended than those, on the calendar pre-planned, because people are just going to find reasons to work from home.
Anyone else wants to add?
Yeah, I'll just add to it real quick to say that I think that the answer to this question depends on what the model is for your company, right? If you are seeing your team for regular, the Tuesday strategic kickoff meetings, right? Then your event doesn't need to be about strategic stuff, because you're already accomplishing that. Maybe it should be focused more on social, more on trust, more on celebrating who we are as individuals on that team, right? Maybe it's inverse though, right? If you are a fully remote company and you never get to do these big strategic annual planning sessions in person, maybe that is the right thing for when you do the gathering, right? And so I think it really depends on the company. One thing I would just add though, is like, whatever it is, it has to be intentional. And like the places where I've seen this fall apart is when people just say like, you should have your team gather like once a quarter. And then you have a bunch of junior managers running around being like, I don't know what that means. Like, do we like do pizza and like go out, or do we like plan something? Or like, I think you really have to show people what good looks like and bring them along. And the last thing I would say is that one thing that I've always thought about in my past few employers when talking about events is making sure we're clear if we expect people to attend or participate. Those are extremely different events. And I mean, another way to think about it is it a stage where you're facing a crowd, or is it a table where you're talking to each other? Those are fundamentally different events. And you get different reactions when people are participating in something versus attending something. And I think a lot of people overlook that little bit as to whether or not you want people to show up and listen and be in the room at the time you told them to be, versus you want people to come in and participate and help steer the outcome of it. And I think being very intentional about which type of event it is important for its success.
Thank you, Michael. Ian, anything else to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would say that we've seen just in general more stickiness when we've created those opportunities for especially our remote employees that don't get the chance to be around their colleagues in person that much. But when we create those opportunities at least once or twice a year where they can come together, either come to headquarters or one of our other regional offices, it just establishes those relationships at a deeper level. And it just creates in general more stickiness with the company and with each other, more trust. People are much more easily able to reach out to others that they've met in person rather than only knowing them digitally, So I would highly encourage that. I know that it has helped us tremendously to every once in a while at least have everyone together for different events. So.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all the great answers and questions from our attendees, and have a great rest of your day, night, and join us next time in our next episode. Thank you all.
Thank you.